Welcome back to the Mining Your Business podcast, a show all about process mining, data science, and advanced business analytics. I am, yet again, Patrick, and with me, as always, my colleague Jakub. Hi there.
Hey, Patrick.
Today's episode is all about how you can royally screw up a process mining project, who is to blame, and how to do things differently. All that is coming up next.
Sometimes, no matter how well you plan the project, it becomes a disaster. We are here to tell you what parts of the project can and will go wrong, what to do about it, and how to prevent them in the first place. Luckily, we will have here our most experienced colleague, the senior delivery manager, Nicolas Möller. Nico, welcome to the show. We are very excited to have you here.
Thanks, Jakub. Happy to be here.
Nico has been with our company for so long that whenever we have some issue and we don't know how to solve it, we usually just say, go ask Nico. But before we go into the screw-ups and into the core of our episode, Nico, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? We recently did an episode about key people in the process mining initiative, and the delivery manager wasn't on the list. So what is it that you do, and how did you even end up in the process mining?
Maybe I'll start with how I ended up here. Celonis was a startup coming out of TU Munich. And I had a friend who was working there early on, tried to convince me that process mining and Celonis itself is a nice idea. In the beginning, I was a little bit skeptical. I thought, okay, in any case, I can work with the data. Why would I need to buy a software for that? But after some convincing, I actually thought, okay, it might make sense to get people not familiar with the data and not familiar with programming languages together with process visualizations and data analytics. So I joined Celonis back then still as a student, and in the end, decided I still like working with data better than I like working with software. Followed our founders here to Processand, started out as a data scientist. And what do I do now? It's not so much the technical stuff that sadly is mostly gone now. I'm more helping organize stuff, line up projects, try to be in important meetings, and if problems pop up, help people solve them. So pretty much taking care of everything and nothing.
Oh wow! So you've been in this space for quite some time then. So before we get into all the things that can go wrong and the things where it can steer off the path, I kind of wanted to ask how you measure the success of what you do.
I think for us as a company, it's pretty easy. I mean, if the customer is happy, we're happy. That's how we stay in business. But what makes the customer happy, that's, I think, the more difficult question.
So what customer is easier to please?
Honestly, the easiest approach for me is if a customer has a specific set of goals, like he knows he has problems, he knows what he wants to change, he knows what he needs to do, and also has a time plan. Like best example is when we go 4 or 5 years back, process mining was still pretty new. People didn't have any experience, and they saw these great visualizations. You see a process from end to end, you see all deviations. You can see where the loops are, where manual changes are, and people just expected it to be magic. So you actually...
That's actually interesting. Yeah. Sorry, Nico, go on.
So they had this idea that, okay, they know they have something that is not great with their process, and just by looking at it, everything becomes better. Mm-hmm. But, they didn't understand, first of all, that you first need data to even visualize it. That was the first big thing. And the next thing is, just by seeing something doesn't change it. You haven't understood it, you don't know what to do with it, and even once you understand it, nothing has happened. You just have nice, pretty pictures and spend a lot of money.
Did the expectation somehow change over those years? So you mentioned that, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, they had this expectation that you do process mining, you have this magic box that's just going to give you, here are the bottlenecks, you should improve this and that. While today, I assume that the new onboarding customers are a bit more educated, or is it the case as well?
We still have the cases where you have customers that have not really a great idea of what they need to put into to get some results. But I think in general, what has changed is the attitude of salespeople. So they are not over promising as much as they did a couple of years ago. Also because I think software companies are looking for different profiles to at least have some technical understanding.
I already can see a couple of themes going on here with where we will even lean into that later on. But before we go into the screw ups and into the things that can go wrong, is there also some way on how you can quantify let's say that you are doing an implementation? Patrick already asked similar question, but we always like numbers. And since in process mining, we are always coming up with the KPIs. Can we also have some KPI that we could put a number on the project well done?
From a technical perspective, I think it's easy. You agree on a scope in the beginning. Ideally, you have the same expectations as the customer, or at least you make it clear what do we want to do within this project. And that's something you can deliver. And maybe you fight about smaller things where you say, okay, we didn't agree on that exactly. But the general line of what you should deliver technically should be very clear.
Okay.
Measuring success of, let's say, process mining implementation in general, like how much improvement did I get? You can use KPIs, which I think is the best way. So you say you have a problem, you try to quantify it in whatever way, and then you see how has it changed in the next year.
Mm-hmm.
Still kind of dirty because you don't know if all the changes happening are because of process mining, but I think it's the best you can do actually.
Do you think there is a big difference between quantitative results in these or qualitative results? So when you put an X amount on savings, but you have the qualitative aspect where you get more of an understanding of your processes and you can analyze things. These aren't really like measurable in terms of X value. Do you think those are less valuable or more valuable?
For me, it's honestly the qualitative impact that is more important. But I also understand our customers, if they say they hire 1 or 2 extra persons to process mining exclusively, then I need to tell to their bosses somehow that they saved this and that amount of money. And it's very hard to do with qualitative results. But I think the majority of savings will come in the end from that. If you have clean processes, you avoid a lot of problems that are costing you money in the end, even if it's hard to put an exact number on it.
Okay. Then let's actually get into the screw ups because that's going to be the interesting part. And Nico, we are all ears when it comes to some stories and real life examples. I think our listeners are also keen on hearing those. So essentially, we can split it into the 2 major categories. So we have these hard factors and soft factors. Since you came up with this separation, maybe you can already introduce us into that.
I mean, the hard factors are normally the easy part of a project because it's just a problem you need to solve. It's very hard to do process mining, like I mentioned, without having data. So somehow we need to get a software in place. We need to get the data from the source systems into actually our software. And of course, we need to hope that the data is even there.
Okay. Yeah. So you say the data needs to be there. And I can assume that this is usually not just you go to the customer, click a few buttons and connect instantly and everything works smoothly for the rest of the days. Elaborate a bit more on this actually.
So normally when we start a project, we start talking to people that are actually interested in their processes, and they are not the same people that are managing their IT. So what we tell them, okay, we need a server, a connection, some network access, actually not very big things, and it doesn't take a lot of effort. But it's not the same people that are interested in the project that need to do those steps. And as a general rule of thumb, the bigger the corporation is, the higher the requirements are for how is it supposed to be exactly in the end. I mean, Jakob, you had a customer last year where I think we were fighting for 2 months about how should we connect. And then we decided on a very custom way that took another 1 or 2 months to set up. In the end, it still works, but it takes a lot of time. And it's normally not the expectation to spend half a year in the setup phase. So that's already a bad start for a project for us.
Do you think that this is because the people that you mentioned, the people that work in IT, are not involved in the project and couldn't really care about them, that makes them reluctant to set this up? Or is it more of an actual infrastructure, like getting the server set up and connecting all the wires? Like, what is the bottleneck here?
Well, I mean, sometimes people are unwilling and blocking, but I think that's not usually the case. Normally, it's just that IT has a lot of work and they have different priorities than new projects. For example, we had an electricity provider, I think 1.5 years ago, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment that we actually kicked off the project and wanted to start, that this VAT changes in Germany because of Corona. So all their IT was basically doing for 2 months was trying to figure out how to get the VAT changes into their system, because it also stops at some point. And you had some special cases that were very hard to cover. So it wasn't that they were unwilling, they had just different priorities, because they had more important problems to figure out than starting a new initiative. And I think that's the case quite often, maybe not as extreme, but they have other work to do. And unless you somehow get them to prioritize it, it will be hard to get it done quickly.
So this is very much a capacity issue, in your opinion.
Yeah, like if we're looking at smaller customers, a couple of Swiss ones, where I remember it took, I think, half a day in total to organize everything, to agree, and then the actual setup we did together in 1 hour. So it can be very quick, but sadly that's not the normal case.
That sounds a bit surreal to me, because I don't have an experience where it would take less than 2 months, actually. So I guess I'm the lucky one. Nico, how can we even, when you are aware of these things coming into the project, since we have the experience with it, how can you even prevent it happening in the first place?
We try to put a lot of buffer in there. We try to warn people that it might not be much work, but it usually takes a lot of time. Some people don't take us seriously, and I think that's probably partly our fault if we don't manage to communicate it appropriately. But otherwise, there's honestly not that much we can do except for plan for these things. Or if we're really lucky and we have some way of putting pressure on IT or direct contacts, that can make it easier. But that's more the exception than the rule.
Can I ask now, when this thing happens, so the setup is delayed by several months, what is the impact of that? For us as a business, and also for the client, what does it do for them?
For us, the impact for the project itself is not that bad. We're just starting our work later, which makes our planning quite difficult, because we also need to work on something and have multiple projects. So it's not great, but it's not horrible. For our customers, it depends. So if you're really unlucky, you have a kickoff workshop where you agree, promise everybody, okay, in general, in 3-4 months, you're going to see the first things. You're going to be able to work with Celonis and then tackle your problems. And suddenly it's half a year later. Maybe if you're unlucky, you're in holiday season, or even in best case, everybody is still there. Nobody changed positions, nobody left the company. But still, they probably forgot pretty much all about what you discussed. They don't know what you agreed on as goals anymore, and are definitely less enthusiastic, because something that was promised to them as an easy solution that was relatively quick suddenly is half a year preparation time before they even get to do anything.
Somehow I have a feeling like you are referring to all my projects. Not sure whether that's intentional or not, but I completely agree with you. And the biggest issue I usually had with this is that since the people are waiting for so long and the expectations are kind of building up, then you really feel this obligation towards them, that you really have to deliver a good job. Because if they're already, let's say, a little annoyed or disappointed by the time it takes, then you are coming into a whole different scenario than if, as you said, the setup of the infrastructure takes altogether a day. So different situation, and then you really have to over deliver to even make them happy. So let's say that we handle this infrastructure. that's not it. Then what the next step are the data, or is the data that we work with. What can go wrong with the data?
I think it's not so much things that go wrong, it's more what data exists. If we're looking at a purchase to pay process, with one big customer a couple of years ago that was very interested in how they're actually giving contracts to suppliers. So this whole negotiation process. And in general, I don't think it would have been complicated, except for the fact that they are tracking everything in Excel.
Oh, God.
So you have an Excel sheet where you can see like which contractors or which contracts you have to which suppliers, what were their quotes, and then you have somewhere PDF files with the actual quotes. And for us, it's a process that's impossible to analyze, or at least not with a justifiable amount of effort, because it's simply not IT based. We don't have any real data points. If we have data points, it's more like handwritten notes. So it's not something where you can actually do a data analytics project, because they're simply lacking maturity for their processes. I mean, 30, 40 years would have been the same for every kind of process. Now it's luckily more for the smaller side processes. The main ones are usually IT covered. But it still happens from time to time and doesn't need to be a complete process, can also just be approval steps where they say, okay, if I'm buying something for 50,000 euros, I need to call my boss and get permission. If we don't have the data, it will be very hard for us to check.
So this client that just had a bunch of Excel files and PDFs, did they expect you to work the process magic and just whip up a process for them, or what was their expectation?
I think they never actually thought about it. So they had the approach that, okay, process mining in general works. We can see timestamps. They were aware of what the output can be, but they didn't have any understanding of what they needed to put in, what they needed to provide, and what we need to work with. So they were not IT people, which is, I mean, fine. Most people aren't, but they're just thinking output based and not what do I actually need. And this is something that we're stressing now very much in every kickoff meeting that we do. What do we need to be able to actually deliver something to only be able to work? And we even bring up examples like this one. Like if you go to your colleague next door to ask some questions, it will not be a data point in your process, which sounds obvious to everybody working in the industry. But if you never give it a thought, then you might not realize it.
So is that the way to prevent kind of these knowledge gaps in these people? Mentioning these things early on is to kind of pump the brakes on people that don't really know what this will look like in the back end?
I think it's the solution, but it's also very difficult. You probably know it yourself. Like if we get a new colleague here, you know a lot of things that are self-evident to you. Mm-hmm. And they have no idea. And when they do something, you ask yourself, how can this happen? I mean, this is completely obvious. But if you think about it, then it's not their fault. It's more your fault because you just assume people know exactly the same thing as you do.
Right. So it's just about keep repeating the mistakes you've made and telling other people and just to keep educating them. And also, that's probably the most important part to do in the workshops where you can already alert the people and make sure that they are aware of things that can go wrong. So definitely a good to prepare at this at the very beginning. Nico, before we jump into the soft factors, do you have some story maybe from these hard factor things? So from the IT perspective, data perspective, that maybe caused a lot of overhead efforts, or maybe even was a showstopper at some point that you can think of right now?
I think there's a lot of smaller topics like the one I mentioned before. There was one other big customer that actually is distributed worldwide. So has shares in a lot of companies, a lot of IT systems spread out. And they are actually very diverse. So for them, it was important to get the legacy systems in there, which is some stuff they built in the, I think, 70s or 80s. actually not very complicated, but they were still doing half their business in those legacy systems. And for them not covering them would have meant that they're blind on half the company. So simply wasn't acceptable. And they first of all had no idea how to get the data out of the systems. That was one issue. And then they had no idea how to get the data into Celonis.
Well, Excel files, obviously.
Kind of. In the end, we had CSV transfers. So they are extracting simple files with lines of text every day, putting them on a server. And we wrote a tool to actually get that into a database and work with it in the end. But the whole process took ages. Wasn't really fun and was not something that anybody expected. And also not something that we could have been aware of before, because first of all, we didn't even know the legacy systems existed. We got in with the information that, okay, we need to analyze a P2P process in SAP. And by the way, there's one or two systems that you also need to kind of take into account, but not half the company is missing in SAP. And then, of course, as it was a self-built solution, we don't have any experience where we can say, okay, you need to do this and that. But we are relying on people that actually built this, which meant, in this case, I think it was the head of sales in the end that 20, 30 years helped develop that system, that supported us and helped us figure out how to get the data, how to interpret it. But he was already back then in the 60s. And if we had come 10 years later, I don't think we would have had anybody to talk to.
Oh, wow. You said it took ages, like from the start of the project to when you actually were able to actually work with the data. How long did that take?
So for SAP data, I mean, was back in 2017. That was still much more complicated than it is today, less standardized. So I think we had the first data in after 6 or 8 weeks, but that was just SAP. And to actually get the flat files out and into Celonis for the legacy systems, 4.5, 5 months. And the whole project was actually planned to finish, I think, within 2 after the first data came in. So our customer was pretty confident that they could get us the remaining data after the first SAP extract within a couple of weeks. And we said, okay, it's fine. We parallelize our work. In the end, we were pretty much done with everything before we even got the legacy systems. And then it's even more work to integrate something new into an already existing solution than build it up from scratch. So yeah, wasn't fun. In the end, they're actually quite happy with it. And now it's a useful tool because they can see their legacy systems compared to SAP. They're slowly migrating everything because they also recognize that there are issues, at least with, for example, maintenance. If the last people who developed it go into retirement. So it's definitely worth something in the end, but it took a lot longer than expected.
So do you think, to me, because Celonis is a licensed software, right? So you have to pay every year. I would assume that these delays cause some sort of cost-benefit analysis in some people's minds. In your recollection, do you remember any time when somebody just said, well, we're pulling the plug, this is not worth it, we're not going to get done on time, we've had 3 months of actual analysis, this is not worth it?
This is actually, I think, the interesting part with software. Like if you're a neutral person, then coming in at that moment when you see all the problems, maybe you would pull the plug and say, okay, we're not doing this anymore, we're done. But I don't think this has happened so far to us. And in my opinion, it's mostly because the people that invested the money first. So they spend half a year on a license, let's say. They spend a lot of money on consulting. And I think it's very hard for them to go to their company and say, okay, this was a bad idea. Let's pull the plug and let's not do it. So the money they're spending is actually protecting the project itself. But also, of course, means in the end, you need more savings that they're actually happy about it.
Yeah, it's a classic investing problem. Nobody wants to cut the losses and just move on and just rather go with the sinking ship. No, it's not really a sinking ship, but you probably get the point. So moving on to the soft factors and to the people, really, a lot, as I can hear from what you're saying, a lot can already be prevented at the early phase before we even before even the implementation starts. And you said that the salespeople usually used to build up the expectation very high. It improved, but just like recapturing all those points. Can the salespeople already do something differently in order to prevent these unwanted situations?
Sure. I mean, they could actually just paint a realistic picture of what they can get out of Celonis, the customers in the end, how much effort does it take, how much effort actually comparable projects took, and they could even bring customers together with one another. So it would be very easy to be realistic, and I think the cost benefit would still be fine. But to be fair, it's not their job. So, I mean, it's our job in the end to build it. And you can't expect neutral and objective opinion from a salesperson. If you're buying a car, they're also not going to tell you, okay, this is actually tends to break down after 2 years or 100,000 kilometers. But they'll rather tell you, look how shiny it is.
True.
So, what you're saying is that the salespeople have these sometimes you could say outrageous claims what these software can do for a client, and then they get funneled to us, and then we have to kind of actually convert these outrageous claims that the salesperson actually sold to this customer, right?
To say it's outrageous, I think is a bit harsh. I know a lot of salespeople that are, of course, positive in the way they talk about Celonis, and maybe a bit too positive. But I don't think that there's a lot of salespeople that are really lying. But of course, you can't expect them to point to all the problems that might happen and tell people, watch out there, this might be an issue. But then in the end, it's our job once we start our projects to make sure that the expectations from the customer are in line with reality.
Okay, so that we are not only throwing some shade on other people, let's talk also about us. I mean, we are responsible for a lot of screw ups ourselves. I can totally imagine, even though we try to do our best work, we are still people and we do mistakes. I'm just interested. What can you remember a mistake that you did last? So if you were looking back into last couple of weeks or months, what kind of mistake did you do that maybe caused some problems down the line in the project?
I think last couple of weeks is too early to tell. On my first project that I ever did, we actually did something we always do. We talked about what do we want to achieve in the project, what should we realize. And instead of actually focusing on what we should deliver and what we could deliver and is it actually justified? Is it worth the effort? We pretty much asked our customers, what do you want? And of course, we get a very long list. And in the end, pretty much everything is possible. But it's going to take you a lot of time. They're not going to be able to work on their worst pain points early on because it takes you ages to deliver. So instead of say standard scope where we know we can cover it in 1 or 2 months, we had a huge list of topics that they wanted to cover, I think 30, 40, something like that. And to be honest, I don't think that they have looked at probably 20, 25 out of those within the first year after we implemented. They already had a lot of data to analyze. And if you don't push the customer in the right direction, if you avoid having that discussion, we can't do everything right now, that's a problem. And this was one we had early on. Right now, I think we're much better at it, but it's still a tendency in people to avoid having unpleasant conversation. So if there is a problem, or if you say you can't have everything you dreamed of, that's something that I think everybody likes to do rather later than sooner. So we need to push ourselves every time and getting better at it, but we're not perfect, of course.
I mean, this is definitely an interesting point. We have actually also mentioned this in one of our podcast episodes. The key steps to being good at this sort of thing is like always deliver what you've promised, and to promise what you can deliver is one of the key things. So in your mind, is there so when you talked about this, is there anything that was undoable in their list of demands or wants, needs?
In this case, there was one item that would have taken way too much work, which we didn't recognize back then. Don't want to get too much into specifics, but it was just technically very complicated. For the rest of the topics, they were all fine. I mean, most things are technically doable. Just the sheer volume of it is very hard, first of all, for us. We invested a lot of time afterwards to more or less deliver what we discussed. So basically work for free for a lot of days. And for them, it gets even worse because they get a new software and then they need to suddenly figure out how to work with 30, 40 analytics.
Right. Interesting. I'm also thinking about, so a lot of work that we do is basically in the trenches, meaning that we do a lot of coding, do a lot of data setup. And these are a lot of obviously experience and experience-based things. The more you do it, the more confident you do it. Is there maybe something that, since you worked with a lot of beginners, or let's say people who were fresh in our company, you basically was their guidance on their path to become a data scientist. Is there something from technical perspective that most of us are usually doing wrong, and you are that person who already did that and you know how to do it better? Something that you could highlight for us?
Nah, I think that's not a generic technical problem. I think it's a problem that when you have a problem, you try to figure it out. You are on your way, and you are then, well, just trying to figure out and go along the path. So you start one way, then you're pushing through, you hit another problem, you try to fix your solution, and you try to fix it again. And in the end, maybe you have a very simple problem, and just because you started off the wrong way, you try to keep going. You have a horrible solution in the end that ideally doesn't work, because then you're forced to reconsider and maybe find an easier way. But if you're actually unlucky, then it works. It returns you the results that it should. And half a year later, you have a colleague coming to the project, looking at it and having absolutely no idea what you did there. And is pretty much afraid to touch it.
Is this a big thing with the newbies? Do you think there needs to be some oversight so that they don't approach these problems from the wrong angle? And since they arrived at the right solution, that this is their way forward, and they kind of take that strategy on with every other problem that they might face?
I think it's more something that we need to change our attitude. So not our first idea is going to be the best one, and be ready to just say, okay, I'm not moving forward. Maybe I need help from our customer. Maybe I need help from a colleague, and maybe I just had a very bad idea and I need to abandon it. But that's also not very human. And I think the next problem is we are very diverse in our company, in the sense that the educational backgrounds of people are very different. So I studied math myself, and we like clean, elegant solutions, but on paper. And while programming is not complicated, there's nobody that teaches you the value of clean code in mathematics. Same in business. Not sure how engineering is. So you can always see the differences in style when you have somebody that was taught 4 or 5 years, work cleanly, comment your code, and somebody else needs to work with it in the future, compared to somebody like me who gets told, okay, you have a problem, solve it. And don't worry about, well, does it look nice? Is it maintainable? Because once a problem is solved, it's done. And I think this is a very bad attitude.
I am kind of on the same boat with you on this one, though. I also, when I have a problem, once it's solved, it's done. No worries. We'll just go on from here.
See, I'm differently. If I have a problem and the solution, I want it to look good as well. So I'll spend like a couple of minutes formatting everything. So, if I come back to it, I'll be pleased.
Same for me, but I think it took me at least half a year, or people to actually start working on the stuff that I delivered, until I really did that. Before, it was nice if code looks clean and is maintainable, but it simply wasn't an objective.
So maybe we're getting to the roots of this origin of Go Ask Nico.
For my first projects, definitely. I think right now it's at least manageable to work with my ideas.
Okay. Then the next people who are also involved in the project, it's not only the salespeople and us who build the solutions, but are also customers. And I can imagine that customers also do mistakes that eventually can cost a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of money. What would you highlight in this phase for these people? What do they usually do wrong? What is their attitude that is influencing us in a negative way?
So first of all, customers, I think, do most mistakes in the whole project, but in the end, it's probably our fault because for most of them, it's their first project, and we're supposed to advise them and make sure that they avoid mistakes. And sometimes, it's hard. We can tell them something, they can decide against it. Okay, then there's not much we can do in the end. We can force them to go our way, but they should be aware if we have a different opinion and if we think it's a bad idea. Customers cause a lot of issues, but I think in the end it's our job to avoid them or to fix them. Where are those issues? I think it starts actually with which people you involve in the project. Like usually you have somebody that was excited by seeing Celonis, that liked the idea of process mining, said, okay, I have a problem. And either he has the budget himself to pay for it, or he pushes his boss or his boss's boss to actually come up with the money. But you always need more than that one person. Like more often than not, it's somebody that's rather higher up in the ranks, so not in the day-to-day work. And he's also not going to be the one using Celonis, but that's rather other people. And one of the worst things that can happen is that we don't involve the people that are supposed to get value out of it from the beginning of the project.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was part of this project, or at least one of these where this happened. That the people who were supposed to be using it weren't even consulted on what they really wanted. So essentially, we built this pretty tool, and then the people looked at it and says, "I don't know what this is. What am I supposed to do with this?" So yeah, that took a few weeks for them to even realize what they were looking at.
Yeah, I think in this project actually, this was not even like bad intent on any side. Like we actually mentioned that we need those people using it, but the perspective of the customer of who those people were and who they were in the end was very different. So if we're talking about the same one, then they were very IT focused. So they actually knew all the problems and were very helpful, in my opinion, in figuring out how can we figure out exactly these problems? How can we quantify them? How could we even improve them in the end? But yeah, the end users weren't really a part of it, which at least I wasn't aware back then. So I didn't even understand that was an issue. I thought that the people that were in the first workshops were also the ones using Celonis. Which is probably another soft factor that we need to take into account to be very clear and pretty much put everything into writing, not to be like a lawyer and back ourselves up, but just to avoid misunderstandings.
Knowing what you know now, Nico, this is, I think, at the moment one of the most crucial parts, and that's basically when we jump off the project or go a bit away and give it over to customer. And this is a very delicate scenario or situation because you need to make sure that the customer actually understands what you built for them and that there is at least some adoption over time. How would you approach it if you were in charge of this project from the customer perspective? So let's say you are the project sponsor and you hold the keys from the project, and you can basically boss people around a bit, make sure that they use it. How would you approach it? What would you do so that the solution eventually serves its purpose?
I think the biggest mistake is not in how the handover happens, but when you worry about it. Say you have a 6-month project, then everybody, if you're in a lucky situation of having motivated people that all want to work together, everybody's working on that project. So you have a specific goal, you want to implement, you want to figure out what kind of value can I get out of it, and maybe find the first measures. And in the end, you have a nice PowerPoint or nice document which tells you, okay, what could you do? But that's your end goal. And I think part of the project should always be to figure out how are we going to do the operational setup? What kind of people are supposed to use Celonis in the future? Is it possible for them to use Celonis? Because do they have time? They also have other jobs. Need to figure out how to fit it into their work life and how can they benefit. And then you also need to figure out the structure on how to push people. Like you said, what would I do if I'm the boss of the project? It's very hard to tell because maybe I'm in charge of the project, but afterwards there is not even anybody in charge. And I need to force people to use Celonis in any case, unless I have a full-time employment that's taking care of it. Then they have the time, they will take it. But other people, I need to assign responsibilities. I need to set them goals. I need to check in every 2 weeks, every month. How are you coming along? How is this improvement happening? What are your savings? What kind of support do you need? I can't expect people to just, magically get a tool, try to improve their processes, and then everything goes smoothly. But changing things is always painful and it's always a fight.
If you hearken back to your early days, a couple of years ago, with the user adoption strategy, has your mind changed, or has the strategy of the company changed on how we increase user adoption at the end of a project? And how is it like now compared to then?
I think back then it wasn't even part of the strategy. It's also the same if you look at Celonis promotional videos from 2011, 2012. They are just showing you those nice process graphs, some charts, some deviations, these nice bubbles floating through. Right now, you will hardly see any of that. They will be more focused on what kind of value did I get out of it? What did I change? So more impact driven. And I think that's something that hasn't only changed in us, but in everybody. Because also that's something that distinguishes process mining projects from BI projects. So our goal is almost never to just build a reporting tool, which is fine, but actually deliver the information you need to change your company and to improve your processes. So the thinking has changed more from an analytical one to an impact driven. So right now we're worrying about it for probably the last 2-3 years. And before it wasn't even a big topic.
So with this new strategy, what has the impact been on the customer?
And for some customers, especially smaller ones, it's very direct and it's very quick. The example I picked where we took 1 hour to set up the infrastructure, they are also ones where you have the option to sit together with head of purchasing, his 3-4 top operational guys, and they're very open about it. So you look into a process, you see some issues, like actually we can do it with everybody, and we do it with everybody. But then you also directly see, okay, who is responsible for that? I know that person, I know what he's doing. Or they say, okay, I'm a bit surprised by what I'm seeing here. I don't believe it. Then they check and they actually see that there's an issue, but they are invested themselves and they have the power to change. If you're looking at a global company, maybe some central function is purchasing Celonis, is pushing through the project, and then to get some local subsidiary to change will take years. So I think there will be impact, but far down the road.
Yeah, so it's just for the bigger hegemots in the market, just takes way longer to change, obviously, right?
Unless you have somebody with, let's say, a lot of pull that can push changes through, then it gets better. But even then, it's still a fight.
Mm-hmm. Nico, we talked about a lot of things that can go wrong in the project, but would you also think about something that went exceptionally well, even in your own experience, that you were surprised that happened so smoothly, and that you are eventually now looking back into what you've done, and you say, "Wow, that was a good job. I'm proud of it."
Honestly, I'm proud of most things that we do. So we have a lot of smaller failures in our projects, but to say that a project failed, I think that happened maybe once or twice over the past 5 years. Well, not only our fault, but definitely things that we could have done better. But the nice thing is, in the end, people want to work together mostly. So you always have people on the customer side that have a motivation to get something out of a project, that have goals. And if you support them, they are most of the time willing to give you or other people a second chance. And it might have been easier in a lot of cases to get some success, to get some impact. But I think nearly always you get there in the end. Because it's not that our failures are caused by people not wanting to do things and not working together, but rather by honest mistakes. And if you talk about them, usually you can fix them.
So just like any other relationship.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, Nico, I think this is a very nice wrap for the episode. We are very happy that you made some time for us. We know that you're a busy person and that you came here to talk about what can and at some point always will go wrong in a process mining project. For our listeners, thank you for tuning in on another episode of Mining Your Business podcast. We are very excited to have you on the board. And if you have any question, any recommendation, maybe if you want to hear someone from the process mining community in our podcast, just write us an email, miningyourbusinesspodcast@gmail.com. We are happy to hear any feedback from you whatsoever. And as usual, we will be looking forward to the next episode that will be coming out in 2 weeks. Patrick, Nico, thank you very much for the nice discussion, and talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, Nico. Bye.
Thanks, Jakub. Thanks, Patrick.